Hello, welcome everyone who joined us today for our webinar. I am Jackie Wedeking. I'm the Communications and Marketing Manager for Trees Forever, and this is Debbie.
Hi everybody, I'm Debbie Fluegel, and we're just doing a test.
We just want to make sure that everyone can hear our audio, so if you are having a hard time hearing us, go ahead and flag us down. You should have my email in your email. You should have gotten an automatic email from me with my email address. So if you have any questions, go ahead and send me any technical questions. Please send them to my email and I will try and help you troubleshoot. So if you are having any problems, again, go ahead and send me that email. I'm not seeing anyone, so we're just going to hang out for a little while because we will start very promptly at 11 o'clock. And again, this is just an audio check, so I am just going to keep talking for a little while to make sure that you know that your speakers work. And if your speakers do not work, there is an option to be able to call in. And if you cannot hear me, you won't be able to hear me say that anyway, so let me type that into the box. So Debbie, while we wait, do you want to just give kind of a brief overview of what you do in Illinois?
Sure. So I work, and I'm a field coordinator and program manager in Illinois. I manage our Illinois Buffer Partnership Program, which is our water quality program, working with landowners, farmers, and communities, helping them to plant trees, shrubs, grasses, and wildflowers to improve water quality, reduce erosion, and provide wildlife and pollinator habitat. I also manage the pollinator habitat conservation program for both Illinois and Iowa. We're planting native plants to provide habitat for pollinators. And I also do work with our Illinois Community Forestry Program, working with small communities throughout central and southern Illinois, helping them to diversify their community forest, helping them to obtain Tree City USA status if they so desire, as well as working with communities that have been impacted by natural disasters.
And Debbie, did you talk about how long you've been with Trees Forever now?
At the end of June, it will be 15 years that I've been with Trees Forever.
Awesome. So obviously our presenter today has a wealth of information, and at the end we will be doing some questions and answers. I know I did have some people email me some questions. If you could do me a favor and just at the end go ahead and put your questions in the questions tab on the side panel, that'd be really helpful because that helps Debbie be able to see those questions too. So again, we are going to get going in about 10 minutes here. So hang tight. I'm not hearing about anyone having any audio issues, so I'm assuming that you can hear us. But if you have joined and if you are still adjusting your audio, here is a chance to kind of get your audio checked. Debbie mentioned really briefly that we did some work with towns recovering from natural disasters. And Washington, Illinois was a community that Debbie has been very, very instrumental in helping. And Debbie, do you want to talk a little bit about your experience with helping Washington and your personal story there?
Sure. We after their tornado in November of 2013, we started working with the city as well as the Illinois State Urban Forestry Coordinator, Renee Hildebrandt at the time. She has since retired from DNR. And we started coordinating efforts to replant. They had over 1,000 homes and businesses destroyed by the storm. And so we started in April 2014, and we had our first planting in November of 2014. And we ended up having 3 different plantings in that community, planting about 900 trees back at homes that had been impacted by the storm. Some of those actually the requirements for getting trees planted was that they had all construction. And the part that stands out the most to me is that during that time, while we're out planting trees all throughout town, many of the homeowners were there in their new homes, and they brought us out hot chocolate. It was a chilly, cold day. And one lady stood on her back porch and she just cried as we planted 3 trees in her yard. And it wasn't so much that what we were doing. I talked to her afterwards, and her comment was that insurance covers all of this stuff, referring to the house, the vehicles, all their personal belongings. But she told me that us planting those trees in her backyard gave her her memories back, because now she would be able to have the same memories with her grandchildren that she did with her sons as they were growing up. So trees are sentimental to a lot of folks, me included. And so by helping communities that have been impacted by storms, helping them replant, it provides a little bit of normalcy back to their life.
Awesome. I love that story so much. I'm glad that you're able to tell it. Again, we have about 10 minutes. We're still kind of doing some audio checks. So Debbie and I are just kind of casually talking and getting warmed up. So Debbie, of course, is our presenter, and she's in Illinois, and she'll be launching in here promptly at 11 o'clock. Debbie, you also work with a lot of landowners. Can you talk about some of the work that you do in rural Illinois with buffer programs?
Sure. I work with a lot of rural landowners and farmers, helping them to plant trees, shrubs, grasses, and wildflowers for a variety of different reasons. Some of them, they're planting riparian buffers. So they're planting along a stream or a river to help reduce the amount of erosion. It provides a buffer between the field and the stream, capturing some of the sediment from wind and soil erosion. We also do work with landowners who are putting in windbreaks. So as you drive around rural America, oftentimes the only trees you'll see are the trees around the farmstead or the homestead. And those are windbreaks planted by our grandparents and great-grandparents. And we get calls that their windbreaks are dying. They only last about 50 to 60 years. And so when you plant a windbreak, generally you plant all the same kind of tree. Now we have various diseases out there. Rhizosphere needlecast is killing a lot of our Colorado blue spruce, which is a tree that's commonly planted in our windbreaks. So we want to diversify what we're planting in our windbreaks, not only as far as the species that we're planting. So we don't want to plant all the same kind, but we also want to plant a variety of different sizes of trees so that we're getting various ages, and then we won't have all the trees dying at the same time. We're working with a lot of livestock producers, planting trees around their livestock buildings. It's good for the animals, as well as it makes them a good neighbor, capturing the particles emitted from the barns, shading the animals. And a lot of people, if you can't see the barn, you can't smell it either. So working with putting in wildlife habitat, planting native trees for wildlife, for deer. We have a lot of avid hunters, whether they're deer, birds. So they're planting trees and shrubs that are going to attract those type of wildlife. So it's a little bit of everything. No two projects are the same, and it's all based on whatever the landowner's goals are for their property. So we try to work with them to diversify their planting, encourage them to plant a variety of trees and shrubs, grasses, wildflowers, to meet their goals as well, and help them out as much as we can.
Absolutely. Okay, we have about 5 minutes. So again, anyone who's just joining us, Debbie and I are just kind of having a casual conversation here. That way you can check your audio. And so we're just going to kind of keep continuing that casual conversation. As far as I know, everyone can hear us. So Debbie, I'm taking that as a plus. I'm not hearing anything from anyone. Sorry I had to duck out there for a second. I realized that my power cord was not actually plugged in. I was about to run out of power. Debbie, is your power cord plugged in?
Yep.
Let's do it quick. Okay,
Yep.
awesome. And then Debbie, do you want to bring up your PowerPoint slide to make sure that everyone can see that as well, since we are again 5 minutes out.
Oh.
So as Debbie is looking for that, I'm just going to kind of fill the silence, because again, if you're doing an audio check, you might want to make sure that you can hear us and adjust your speakers. We're just getting set up. So this has been a very interesting time period for everyone with COVID-19, and usually Debbie and all of our field coordinators are out doing presentations to people. And so we've been amazed that people have been so interested in the webinars that we've been able to offer. And so we're glad that we can provide those services to you guys. We will continue to do these. Next week is Earth Week, which usually we would be out planting lots of trees. And instead, we are going to try and provide some more webinars. Try and be patient with us, because we'll get that schedule out very soon. We're still working on some of those plans. This is kind of new to all of us. So we're just trying to evolve with the times. So Debbie, how are you doing over there?
A little bit of challenges trying to figure out how to get my screen to pull up.
Okay. Let's see. If you hide your web camera, can you show? Does that help? Okay. Now people are probably seeing me. There is a little panel on the right-hand side. Oh, now I see you again, Debbie. There is a panel on the right-hand side that says no one can see your screen. Click to start sharing. Do you see that? It's
Yeah,
right
but it's not letting me click it.
Oh.
Okay. It's grayed out.
Okay.
Oh. You can see yours. I can see yours, but not mine.
Let me switch you to the presenter. And I'm sorry, folks. This is why we try and get on here a little bit earlier. And I was more concerned with audio than showing this. So let me go ahead and, okay, give that a try now. Can you hit it now, Debbie?
Nope. Nothing.
Okay.
It's still showing your screen.
How about now? Can you hit it now?
Nope.
Okay. Yes, I want to make you a presenter. It gave me an option.
Here we go. Yes. Yes.
Yay. Okay. Well, the good news is that it's 10:58, so we're still okay. I can see your screen. You want to bring up your PowerPoint presentation. And I didn't hear anyone having any problems, so I'm assuming that everyone can see something. Again, if you have a technical issue, please go ahead and email jwediking@treesforever.org, and I will try my best to help you. Now that it is 11, I'm going to hide my screen, because as a communications person, you don't want to talk to me. You want to hear from Debbie, because she is our experts. So thank you again for joining us. We're so glad that you could be here with us, and take it away, Debbie.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Debbie Fluegel. I'm the Illinois Field Coordinator and Program Manager for Trees Forever. Coming to you live from my living room, as we all are during these times. I've been with Trees Forever. It will be 15 years at the end of June. I am the program manager for our Illinois Buffer Partnership Program, which is our water quality program in Illinois, working with landowners, farmers, and communities, helping them to plant trees, shrubs, grasses, and wildflowers to reduce erosion, provide wildlife habitat, and improve water quality. I also manage our pollinator habitat conservation program for both Iowa and Illinois. And I also work on our Illinois community forestry program, working with small communities throughout central and southern Illinois, helping them to diversify their community forest, replant after emerald ash borer, and also help recover after natural disasters. So with that, we will jump right into our presentation. If anyone has any questions, please feel free. We're going to have a time at the end for questions, so send them to me in your chat box. If you have any technical questions, if you can't hear me or you can't see my screen, send them to Jackie Wedeking, our marketing manager. Her email would have been in the registration email that you received. So with that, we're going to jump right in. I'm going to turn my camera off so you can see my screen. Trees Forever, who we are. Our mission is to plant and care for trees and the environment by empowering people, building community, and promoting stewardship. We have been around for 30 years now. We planted just about 3.5 million trees throughout the Midwest, throughout Illinois and Iowa. We are a nonprofit organization, so we do depend on our Trees Forever members to continue our work. We do have a staff of 20 to 22 people split between Iowa and Illinois. The majority of our staff is located in Iowa, and our headquartered office is in Marion, Iowa. There are 2 of us in Illinois, and we have done some national projects and gotten some national recognition for a variety of things. Annually, we work with about 200 communities, landowners, and farmers, helping them to plant trees, shrubs, grasses, and wildflowers. On average, we work with about 7,000 volunteers a year, and we provide over $650,000 in grants, along with technical assistance to help get those projects completed. So what we're going to talk about today is we're going to break this down into benefits of trees, and we're going to go into some variety of species that are suitable for being planted at your home, and then also how to properly plant and care for your trees. Again, we'll have some time for questions at the end, so feel free to ask those as we're going through. So to begin, why do we plant trees? Maybe we have a sentimental attachment to trees that were at our grandparents or at our homes as we were growing up. But a majority of the benefits are providing, improving our air quality, improving water quality by capturing sediment, providing a screen or visual barrier between your property and the neighbors, or between 2 businesses. Act as a living snow fence during the winter, capturing that snow and blocking that northwest wind. Providing us oxygen, reducing our carbon footprint. Many trees produce food. We can't do without our sugar maples providing us maple syrup for our pancakes and waffles. So these are just a few of the benefits. We're going to continue with those. Trees provide us energy efficiency. During the summer, you can save up to 25 to 30% on your heating and cooling bills by having trees planted on the east side and the west side of your home, as well as on the northwest corner. If you if you plant trees to help shade your air conditioner, it will help it keep cooler as well as run more efficiently. For the winter, if you're planting trees on the northwest corner, that helps block that cold northwest wind that we get here in the Midwest. So it helps. Planting trees around your home will help save you between $100 and $250 in your energy bills every year. Trees reduce carbon dioxide and they give off oxygen, which we need to breathe. They take in our carbon dioxide and use that for photosynthesis to provide sugars for their leaves. And then they store that carbon until the tree dies. 2 large mature shade trees in your front yard will provide enough oxygen for a family of 4 for an entire year. Trees reduce stormwater runoff and flooding. 1 large mature tree can absorb 57,000 gallons of water in a 10 to 12 inch rain. That's, you know, a 500-year flood event. 30 trees absorb 30% of the precipitation through their leaves and another 30% through their roots, thereby reducing the amount of pollutants in sewer systems, saving communities millions of dollars in water treatment costs. Trees also cool our cities and towns. They reduce our heat island effect from all of the buildings and asphalt and our paved surfaces in our communities. By shading our streets, they also improve the lifespan of our streets up to 60%. So our streets are going to last longer, saving on finances for the community. Planting street trees separates pedestrians and traffic, vehicular traffic. So it provides a boundary between where people walk and the street, but it also encourages people to drive slower. People tend to drive anywhere from 5 to 15 miles per hour slower down a tree-lined street than they do on a street that has no trees. Trees increase our property values of our homes. A large mature tree can increase your property value by up to $13,000. They improve our neighborhood appeal, attracting neighbors and businesses, increasing our local tax base. Research has shown that large street trees were the single most important indicator of attractiveness when people were moving into a community. Trees are good for our local economy. Trees planted in the downtown area, in your business district, it causes people, one, to drive slower down the street. So instead of whizzing by, they actually have time to look into the storefront windows. People tend to stay longer in those shopping areas that have trees, and they're willing to spend up to 12% more for goods and services. Trees also reduce crime. It reduces the level of domestic violence and fosters safer, more sociable neighborhood environments. Trees provide a gathering place for neighbors to come out and sit around in the summer. By planting trees and landscaping in all neighborhoods, it reduces the level of fear. This is a study done by the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Trees improve public health. People are more apt to go out and use the trails in your community if they are lined with trees and shrubs. They're more apt to bike, walk, hike. Other things that trees do to improve public health is that they restore us emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. In these crazy times that we're all experiencing right now, we can't go hug our friends and our family, but we can go outside and hug a tree. It helps us, reduces stress. And there have also been many studies showing that hospital patients who can see trees and green space from their hospital room heal faster, they need less medication, pain medication, and they had fewer complications. And trees provide habitat. They provide homes for our birds, our mammals, pollinators, all of our wildlife. So jumping right in here, one of the most common questions I personally get asked at the various presentations or displays that we do at Trees Forever is, what can I plant in my yard? And my standard answer is, I don't know, because I don't know where you live. There are some factors to consider before planting trees in your yard. Number one, what type of soil do you have? Do you have our good Midwest black dirt that grows anything? Do you have clay soil that's going to hold water? In which case, there are a few trees, you know, you're more limited on what you can plant. For instance, evergreens do not do well in clay because clay holds water. Evergreens don't like to get their roots wet. Or do you have a sandy soil where it's a little more dry? You're going to have to water it more frequently. Perhaps if you have a sandy soil, perhaps something like a black oak might do well for you. Does your yard have wet and dry areas? Where are you planting this tree in your yard? Does it have standing water every time it rains? Or is it pretty dry? How much sunlight do you have where you're planning to plant this tree? Do you have full sun? Nothing's blocking it? Do you have sun part of the day, or is it completely shaded? How much space do you have? Are you looking for, do you have a huge front yard or backyard where you could plant anything? You could plant a tree that gets 40 feet wide and 100 feet tall, or do you have a small 10 by 10 patch of front yard that you want to plant a tree in? It depends on how much space you have, what type of tree you can get. Do you have utility lines, whether they're overhead utility lines or underground utility lines? And what do you like? We are all not going to agree on what kind of tree to plant in your front yard. You need to plant something that you like, that you are able to manage and take care of. And then also you want to check with your local tree board or city ordinances to find out if there are any prohibited trees that are not allowed to be planted in your community. Oftentimes those trees would be invasive species that can be aggressive, grow aggressively, take over an area. So check with your local tree board to see what is prohibited in your community. I would like to highlight this section on this is on our Trees Forever website. Our website is treesforever.org. If you do /tree_selection, there are a bunch of documents on there that I want to show. And I'm going to turn my camera back on to show them to you because I could not get a screenshot of the entire page. So, turning my camera back on. So, hi everybody. One of the documents that's on there is your roadmap to plant and care for your trees. This is the first one that's showing up on my screen. How to plant your tree, everything you need to do, including calling. In Illinois, we call Julie. Iowa, I believe they call 811 for your utility lines. Select a species, how to properly plant. This brochure is on the website there. We also have these are downloadable documents. These are recommended shade trees for dense shading. We also have recommended shade trees for moderate to sparse shading. We also have some recommended species for windbreaks. So these are all evergreens that are good for windbreaks. We also have our trees and shrubs for pollinators. These are all native Midwest species that attract pollinators. So the nice thing about this is that it has the mature height. It tells what time of the year these plants bloom, as well as what pollinators they attract. And we also have on there, for communities who are looking to plant in your downtown area, or you want a street that has all of the same look, but you want to diversify, you don't want to plant all the same tree. Our landscape architect on staff, Emily Swihart, developed these tree selection aids. So there are two of them. This one is for linear, so straight sites, linear sites without overhead power lines. There's also another one that is with power lines. So these trees here, so if you're looking to have all the same shape, but you want to diversify the species, it gives you a list of trees here that all have a similar shape. So as you look down the street, you will still get that uniform look that you want, but you do have the diversity of species that you need. So I'm going to turn off my camera now. So if you want to go to our website after we get done here, treesforever.org/tree_selection. And all of these documents you can download and print off. So it gives you some options on what we are encouraging you to plant. So moving right on. So we're going to break down, I have 11 different species that I'm going to talk about. And I broke them down into 4 groups. We're going to start with trees for pollinators. And these are recommended by Dr. Douglas Tallamy, who is a researcher, entomologist, and ecologist at the University of Delaware. And so these trees provide the first food source for Lepidoptera. And Lepidoptera is the scientific name for the family that includes all of the butterflies and moths. So these are the top 10 species of trees. And you'll notice in parentheses there are numbers after each of the species. Those numbers represent the number of different types of moths and butterflies that need that tree to complete their life cycle. When we think of butterflies and moths, we often think of the adults, the big-winged, beautiful insects, and they need pollen and nectar to eat. And many of these trees on here, oaks, the number 1, they don't have very showy flowers. But you have to think of the whole life cycle of the animal. What do caterpillars eat? They eat leaves. Many of them, 534 different kinds, eat oak leaves as their first food source. So all of these trees provide food source for caterpillars of butterflies and moths. So we'll jump right in here. River birch is a beautiful tree. It doesn't have very showy flowers. The unique feature of the river birch is it has this exfoliating, peeling bark. It has a simple toothed leaf. The trees can be either multi-stemmed or a single trunk. This tree gets up to 40 feet tall at maturity. It prefers full sun or partial sun. And many insects, including the morning cloak butterfly and a variety of moths, feed upon the leaves, as well as many birds, including the purple finch, black-capped chickadee, and pine siskin, eat the seeds. So this is a great tree. It doesn't get very tall, about 40 feet. It provides some color with the reddish peeling bark. It's a beautiful tree for your yard. Another tree would be a swamp white oak. So thinking back to that list from Doug Tallamy that I just showed, oaks were number 1. So I do have 3 different oaks on my list here that we're going to talk about. This one is a swamp white oak. It has simple alternate leaves. It has acorns that are at the end of a stalk. It has smooth green leaves on the bottom. If it's the top of the leaf is a bit waxy and the bottom looks whitish in color. It's hairy. This tree gets 50 to 60 feet tall at maturity. It prefers full sun. These are a fairly long-lived tree. They live well up to 350 years old. And many insects, including the hair streak butterflies, dusky winged skippers, and other moths, feed upon the leaves. And the acorns provide food source for numerous birds and mammals. Oak trees are the quintessential wildlife tree. That they provide everything that majority of our wildlife here in the Midwest need. So Swamp white oak, if you have an area that tends to stay wet in your yard, this might be a good option for you. Black cherry. This is one of my, there's two trees that I'm going to talk about that are my favorite. Black cherry is one of them. It has simple alternate leaves, which means the leaves are in a stair-step pattern going up big. Very shiny, white, beautiful white flowers. It does produce berries. And the young trees have these lenticels. So if you look at the larger picture, it's these little white lines on the trunk. That is an indicator of fruit. Most fruit trees have lenticels, and those provide gas exchange between the inner workings of the tree and the outside. This is a fairly fast-growing tree. It gets about 80 to 100 feet tall at maturity. Prefers full sunlight, but does well in light shade as well. Many bee species visit the flowers of black cherry for their pollen, as well as the caterpillars of tiger swallowtail and red-spotted purple eat the leaves. The berries provide food source for the birds, as well as many mammals. As this tree gets older, the lenticels are not as noticeable, and the bark gets very dark and plate-like. I think of this as, if you look at a mature black cherry tree, the bark looks like burnt potato chips. Another good tree for pollinators is a shagbark hickory. Most recognizable by its very shaggy bark, as it's a mature tree. The smaller seedlings, younger trees, the shagginess is not as noticeable. They have alternate compound leaves, spherical nuts that are consumable by humans if you can get to them before the squirrels do. The husk of the nut is a yellowish green to reddish brown color, and they have these beautiful magenta colored flowers in the early spring. Around where I live, they're just starting to bloom. Shagbark hickory gets about 60 to 80 feet tall. As I said, they're fairly slow growing. They prefer full to partial sun. However, they are a bit difficult to transplant. So if you have some growing in a wooded area that you want to move to your yard, they can be hard to transplant because they have a very deep taproot. They are fairly long-lived, 200 to 300 years. And many insects feed on the various parts of the tree. The bark, the leaves, the juices from the tree, including the hair-streaked butterflies. The exfoliating bark not only provides habitat for pollinators, it provides a place for them to shelter during the elements. It also provides a summer roosting area for the endangered Indiana bat, and provides nesting habitat for a small bird called brown creeper. So shagbark hickory is a great tree. There is another species of hickory, the kingnut hickory, that has somewhat shaggy bark. It's not quite as shaggy as the shagbark hickory. And the biggest difference between those two is the number of leaflets that it has per leaf. So if you look in the picture in the bottom left that shows the hickory nuts, you can see that there are many individual leaflets as part of one leaf. Shagbark hickory generally has 5 leaflets, and the kingnut generally has 7. That's not always the case. Shagbark hickory is also very suited to our Midwest climate. They're able to withstand our very harsh winter environments. Now we're going to talk about a few trees that have showy spring flowers. This one is one of the earliest that's blooming. A little further south, right here where I live in central Illinois, they're not quite blooming yet. They are a little bit further south. With it supposed to snow, I'm not sure if they will be blooming here anytime this week. But Eastern redbud, it has very simple leaves that are heart-shaped. It's very distinguishable. They have this brilliant pink flower that blooms early spring. It can be a single stem tree or it can be a multi-stem tree like the photo here. It's about 30 feet tall at maturity. Prefers partial sun. They live to about 75 years. And when you plant one of these, it should be planted in a somewhat protected area because they're prone to breaking in strong winds. So if you don't want to plant this out in the middle of the open, you want to plant it in a little bit of a protected area. And they do not tolerate wet areas. They do not tolerate flooding at all. They produce a seed, a long brown narrow seed. It's 2 to 4 inches during the summer that hang on throughout the fall and winter. And then they break apart and disperse the seeds. The flowers are pollinated by bees primarily, a variety of bees. And then the seeds are eaten by many of our songbirds, including cardinals, grosbeaks. So this is a beautiful early spring showy flower. Another beautiful showy flower in the spring is the serviceberry. There are about 20 different species of serviceberry. They are all members of the rose family. Some of the other names that you may have heard this called would be a shadbush, shadblow, juneberry, saskatoon, sugar plum, or chuckly pear. Those are all names for serviceberries. They have these beautiful white flowers in the early spring, can be a single stem or a multi-stem tree. They have alternate rounded leaves that are pointed at the base, and they have these reddish purple fruits that are very sweet if you can get to them before the birds do. The tree is pollinated by many different bees, and also the caterpillars of the red-spotted purple and striped hairstreak eat the foliage. Some of the birds that love serviceberry berries include woodpeckers, cedar waxwings, and Baltimore orioles. So if you're looking to attract those birds to your yard, a serviceberry may be the tree for you. With the 20 different varieties, the size is, it's a fairly small tree. It's between 10 to 25 feet tall. The next one we have with showy flowers is our crab apples. These are simple alternate oval leaves that are toothed. They have teeth on the leaves. They flower either depending on the species. Some of them are white and some of them are pink. They have berries that come in on the fall. This is also, crab apples are also a member of the rose family. They get up to about 25 feet tall. They prefer full to partial sun. And for a small tree, they live to be about 50 years. However, like our fruit-bearing apple trees, which they are related to, crab apples also are susceptible to many pests and diseases. Many insects and pollinators feed on the plant. The bees pollinate the flowers. The berries are food source for many birds and animals. You could also, as humans, we could collect the actual berries, the crabs, apples, and they are used to make jellies, cider, and vinegar. So they are edible and used to make products that we use as well. Okay, trees with fall color. This is my other favorite one of all the ones we're talking about today. This is a sassafras. I love this tree because it has 3 different leaf shapes. It has, you look in the picture in the middle left there, it has 3 leaf shapes. One looks like a pitchfork. It has 3 lobes. There's a leaf that looks like a mitten, It only has one lobe, like a thumb, and then there's a leaf that looks like a football. It has reddish brown bark, deeply furrowed. This is a moderately fast-growing tree. In the fall, it turns this brilliant reddish orange color. It prefers full to partial sun. It typically gets 30 to 60 feet, but it can get upwards of 100 feet tall in rare cases. This tree is allelopathic. So what that means is it releases compounds that inhibit the growth and development of neighboring plants. So basically nothing will grow under a sassafras tree. It is pollinated by small bees and flies. The caterpillars of the spice bush swallowtail and the tiger swallowtail feed on the leaves, and many birds and mammals feed on the berries, the drupes, which is the picture in the bottom right. That is what the berries look like. They're a bluish purple color. The nice thing, this tree is great if you're trying to teach children about tree identification. If you scratch the green twig of a sassafras tree, it smells like lemon pledge. If you take a leaf and crunch it up in your hand, it smells like Fruit Loops. Sassafras roots are used to make teas, and as well as they're used to make sarsaparilla and root beer. So sassafras is a great tree. It has a beautiful fall color. It has that orangish red color I absolutely love. Another tree with beautiful fall color is the red oak. This is the second oak on our list here. Simple alternate leaves. The leaves have 7 to 11 lobes that are all bristle tips, so they have points on the ends of their lobes. The leaves get to be 5 to 9 inches long. This is a tree that gets upwards of 75 feet tall. The bark is deeply furrowed, which means it has deep grooves in it, as shown that you can stick a pencil in the deep grooves. In the mature trees, if you look up towards the top of the tree, it looks like there are ski tracks coming down the top of the tree, alternating the light and darkness of the deep grooves in the tree. It looks striped. The tree prefers full sun to partial sun. It's relatively easy to transplant. It does take 2 years for the acorns to develop. So red oaks do not produce acorns every year. They produce them every other year. They can live up to 500 years. The downside is that red oaks are very susceptible to oak wilt, which is a disease that will kill the tree. So encouraging you all to plant a diverse mix of species. Oak wilt is a beautiful tree that has beautiful fall color. This tree is the one tree on my list here that is not native to the Midwest. It's native to China. But I think it's just a fun, cool looking tree. It is has simple alternate leaves. It has these distinctive fan-shaped leaves. And in the fall, it turns this magnificent gold color. It is also known as a maidenhair tree. Its fossils date back 270 million years ago. So they are very long-lived, up to 2,500 years old. They get up to, they're 60 to 120 feet tall at maturity. They prefer full sun, well-watered and well-drained soils. There are male trees and there are female trees. The female trees produce fruit that are very smelly. You do not want to plant them over near a sidewalk that is well traveled. These trees are adapted well to our urban environments. They tolerate pollution and confined soil spaces. They do not have many pests or diseases as they are not native to the United States. So they're rarely attacked by insects. So nothing really feeds on them, which is a downside because they don't provide any food source for our pollinators and wildlife. One thing I did learn and find interesting about these trees is that the male trees are very allergenic. So if you look at the opal scale for allergies, a male tree produces a lot of pollen, and it's on a scale of 7 out of 10. And the female tree doesn't produce any pollen. So on the allergy scale, it's in the low range. It's a 2 out of 10. So we want to plant male trees because they don't have the fruits, but they produce more pollen and cause more allergies. But this is a ginkgo, a beautiful tree. One nice thing about this as well is that when the leaves fall off the tree, they all fall off within a short amount of time. So if you're raking your leaves up, you can look out the window and you have this beautiful golden tree, and the next day you can look out and all of the leaves are going to be on the ground. So all of the leaves fall off in a relatively short amount of time, between 1 day and 2 weeks. The other oak tree on our list here is the white oak, which is our Illinois state tree. Has simple alternate leaves, has rounded lobes. The acorn is oblong. They do produce acorns every year. The bark is grayish and scaly looking. They get to be up to 100 feet tall. They can live nearly up to 600 years, so very long life tree. Prefers full sun, and they are very slow growing. They can be hard to transplant, again, same as the hickories, because they also have the deep taproot. This tree does not do well in areas that get flooded. It prefers to stay uphill in the drier areas. In the fall, the leaves turn a reddish purple to brown color. Beautiful tree. As I mentioned earlier, all of the oaks, these are the quintessential wildlife tree. It provides the most food for the most number of animals, whether that's pollinators, other insects, birds, mammals. There's even been studies showing that reptiles are eating acorns as well if they fall in the water. So this is a beautiful tree for fall color. So now the last group of trees we're looking at are shade trees. These are the trees, large shade trees that are going to provide energy efficiency for us. This is a tulip tree. It is the tallest hardwood in North America. That's to 120 feet tall. It has these unique tulip flower shaped leaves. And in the spring, it produces these beautiful orange, yellow, and green flowers. It prefers full to partial sun, and it grows fairly quickly. For trees, it will produce flowers in about 10 years. The nectar and pollen attract numerous bees and flies, as well as hummingbirds. And many caterpillars and moths eat the leaves of this. So this is a beautiful tree. Generally, in neighborhoods, this is going to be the tallest tree in the neighborhood. It's very distinguishable from the tulip-shaped leaves. The next shade tree is a hackberry, and I've heard people have a love-hate relationship with hackberries, I think. People either love them or they don't. I think they're a great tree. They have these alternate leaves. They're long and toothed. They're kind of a crescent moon shape. They're very rough to the feel. They're asymmetrical, uneven at the base of the leaf. Oftentimes on the underside of the leaf, they will have insect galls. which do not harm the leaf at all. It's just insects. Some insects prefer this tree. In fact, it is the host plant for several butterflies, including the hackberry emperor, the tawny emperor, the morning cloak, snout butterfly, and the question mark. So this is the host plant that these butterflies need. It gets up to about 80 feet tall. The younger trees are very distinguishable by the bark. It looks like there are warts on the bark, like warts on a witch's nose. It's warts on the hackberry. As the tree gets older, more mature, like this photo shows, the warts are not as noticeable. This tree grows fairly rapidly. Oftentimes it has a greenish appearance, and that is the lichens that grow upon that tree. It can live up to 200 years. It does produce berries that provide an overwintering food source for birds. So this is another great tree for shade. Kentucky coffee tree. This is one that many people aren't as familiar with as some of the others. It has doubly pinnately compound leaves, which means if you look in the bottom right-hand picture, to about 75 feet tall.
Hey, Debbie, we
Require full
lost you.
sun.
Debbie, sorry to interrupt. We lost you for just a second there for about a minute. I'm not sure what happened. Could you go back just about a minute? I'm sorry to throw you off. I lost sound and it looked like someone else did here too. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Going back to lost sound, I apologize. I don't know what happened. Going back to the hackberry, the smaller trees have warts on their bark, which are not as noticeable as on the larger trees. They do have the crescent-shaped leaves. Also, the bark tends to look a little bit greenish, which is the lichens growing on the tree. So the hackberry also provides berries throughout the winter for birds. So this is a great shade tree. Okay, moving ahead to the Kentucky coffee tree. This is one that many people are not as familiar with. It has alternate doubly pinnately compound leaves. So in the bottom right-hand picture, that is one leaf with many, many different leaflets on it. It also has large seed pods. Kentucky coffee tree are related to a locust, the honey locust and black locust. But there are many varieties out there, many cultivars that you can get if you don't want seed pods. One of those is the espresso coffee tree, which I've planted in a variety of communities. This tree gets up to 75 feet tall. It prefers full to partial sun, and the young trees grow pretty quickly. It often looks dead because it doesn't have any leaves from mid-autumn to mid-spring. So it is one of the later ones to leaf out. It is pollinated by bumblebees and other native bees. The seeds in the leaves, many mammals and other birds don't eat the seeds and leaves because they're toxic. It tolerates urban conditions very well, and it doesn't seem to have any disease or pest problems. The last one we're going to talk about for shade trees is the bald cypress. This is a deciduous conifer. So conifers are trees that produce cones. So pines, spruce, fir, bald cypress, larch, arborvitae, those are all conifers. Bald cypress is one of the few that is deciduous, which means it actually loses its needles in the fall. They turn brown, they fall off, just like all of our broadleaf trees. It has short feather-like needles. The tree is pyramidal shaped. It produces a round cone, which is that bottom photo there. If it's planted near water, for instance, southern Illinois is known to have its cypress and tupelo swamps. The trees have knees. It helps stabilize the trees in water. They get up to 120 feet tall. The leaves, the needles are very soft, feather-like, soft to the touch. They require full sun. They need wet to moist conditions. So if you have areas that it floods all the time in your yard, standing water, maybe the bald cypress is the tree for you. It is very winter hardy. They can live on average about 200 years, but generally some of them have lived upwards of 1,500 years old. There are very few pests, but they make great habitat for numerous birds, including bald eagles, osprey, owls, herons, and egrets, and woodpeckers. So this is a great shade tree. We're seeing it more and more planted as a street tree, which is kind of hard to believe. But there are some cultivars now that are not as widespreading, and so bald cypress may be the tree for you. So those are the 11 species that I wanted to go through. Hopefully that gave you some ideas and familiarized you with a few species that maybe you're not or were not as familiar with. Now we're going to go into planting and caring for those trees. When you're planting your tree, you want to dig a hole that is twice as wide as the root ball. This is demonstrating a balled and burlap tree, which means the roots are wrapped in burlap and generally there's a wire cage. If you're planting a smaller tree in a container, again, you want to dig the hole twice as wide as the root ball. You want the root flare, which is where the trunk flares out to meet the roots, to develop the roots. You want that to be just at or above ground level. You want to, if you are planting a ball and burlap tree, you want to remove the wire cage and remove as much of the burlap as possible. The roots will not grow through that burlap. We've had sites where we've gone to visit 4 years after the tree were planted, the burlap bag was left on the roots and you could walk up to the tree and touch it and the whole tree moved. So make sure you're removing those burlap bags and that wire cage as much as you can. If you're planting a containerized tree, when you take the tree out of the container, the roots are generally circled or girdled around the tree. They're growing, it's starting to grow in a circle. You need to take a handsaw, a pruners, a knife, and you need to cut through those roots to encourage them to grow outward instead of continue in a circle. If you don't, you will have tree failure. So these are girdling roots. The picture on the left is because the tree was planted too deep. That root flare was below ground instead of at ground level. And then the picture on the right is the roots continue to grow in that circle and cause the tree to fail. So by not taking care of those girdling roots, you're shortening the life of your tree. After you plant your tree, you want to mulch it. It keeps weeds from growing up around your tree. It helps retain the moisture, puts organic matter back into the soil, and it provides a buffer from those pesky lawnmowers and weed whackers, which are going to be out here. They're not out already. However, we want to make sure that you are mulching correctly. The picture on the left, just say no to mulch volcanoes. Piling the mulch up along the trunk is not needed. You want to make your mulch ring wide and shallow. You put your 3 fingers together, the mulch ring should not be deeper than 3 fingers. And you want to mulch throughout the entire drip line, so from the farthest branches out. should be your mulching. You're trying to capture that rainwater that's coming down and through providing moisture throughout the entire root zone. If you have mulch volcanoes, it causes problems. It causes tree rot on the bark. It also encourages rodents to burrow into the mulch. It also encourages girdling roots because they think the soil level's higher than it actually is, and so you have roots starting to come out and girdle the trunk of your tree. I know we have all seen these, but just say no to this. And I have been known sometimes to go out and dig a tree out just if it looks like this. Why else do we add mulch? This is a good demonstration of showing grass versus mulch around a tree. So see the tree roots, the grass is out competing the tree for the moisture and nutrients. The mulch allows that moisture and those nutrients to get into the soil. So if at all possible, you should try to mulch your trees. You also want to protect your trees. You never want to tie anything around your trees, no rope. You don't want to hammer nails into your trees because we as humans forget to do things, and we forget to go back and take the rope off for our stakes. As you can see from the photo on the left is that tree, a rope from the stake has been left on, and that tree is starting to grow over that rope. Eventually the tree will cover that area. They think it's a wound, but that will leave a weak spot in the trunk of the tree, and it could be susceptible to storm damage. On the right hand side, it's a common thing we see, lawnmower damage. We got too close to the tree as we were mowing the lawn. If we put mulch around the base of the tree, that's going to help prevent getting up next to the tree while we're mowing. Watering your tree. Your trees need, from April through November, they need 10 to 15 gallons of water per week, the equivalent of 1 inch of rain. If it's not rain an inch per week, you need to water your tree. Particularly the first 2 to 3 years after you plant, you need to water regularly. Even during drought, you want to water all of your trees, not just the young trees. You want to water the established trees as well. Some of the different ways you can do that is a gator bag, which you can fill up with 10 to 15 gallons of water, and it slowly dissipates the water into the root zone of the tree. You can turn on a hose for a slow drench for a short time. Do not overwater your tree. Or you can just do, take a 5-gallon bucket out and water your tree a couple times a week. For every inch around your tree the trunk is generally a 5-gallon bucket. So if you have a 1-inch tree, generally you want to water it a 5-gallon bucket of water once a week, unless it gets really hot and dry, and then a couple times a week. On the downside, too much water can also be a bad thing. If you don't water your tree, you can kill it. If you overwater your tree, you can kill it. Both of these trees are evergreens, which I mentioned earlier. Evergreens do not like water. And so these have been caused by root rot because they were in standing water too much. Poor drainage. If you're not able to mulch your trees, at least try to weed around them. It prevents people from littering around your tree, hopefully, if there's not weeds around it, and the weeds outcompete your tree for water and nutrients. And with that, I would like to just give a little shout out here that all of the webinars we're doing here at Trees Forever are because of our generous donors and members. And even in these uncertain times, Trees Forever is on a mission to plant and care for trees and the environment by empowering people, building community, and promoting stewardship. Webinars, including the one you just watched, are made possible by generous donors. And so please, if you can, help us to continue these free public webinars by donating today. And you can go to this website, bit.ly/givetf. Your generosity is helping us to plant a better tomorrow. Thank you very much for attending today. I'll open it up for questions right now, but here is my email. Trevor is on all social media. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We do have our own YouTube channel where you can watch videos of our staff. We have videos on shade trees for efficiency, so a few more trees than what I talked about here. Trees for fall color other than maples, and then trees for birds and bees, and some other videos as well. So feel free to look on our YouTube channel. One thing I would like to leave you with is, whatever you're planting, plant a diversity of species. Don't plant all the same kind. One thing you may have noticed is that I didn't mention any maples when I talked about fall color. And if any of my friends and family are watching this, they know that I don't recommend planting maples. And it's not because maples are a bad tree. They're not. They're great. But as we walk through communities, visit communities throughout the Midwest, maples are very overplanted. And so when we do an inventory of the street trees in a community and they're 85% maple, what's going to happen if the next disease or the next pest gets here that prefers maples? So diversify your plantings. You know what's in your neighborhood. So if you're looking to plant a tree in your yard, plant something that is not already overabundant in your neighborhood. So with that, thank you very much. If anyone has any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Got my video back on.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you, Debbie. We do have some questions. I'm gonna, and Debbie, you can see them under the questions tab. I will pull them up though and read them to you in case that's helpful. Our first question comes from Wayne. He says, we now have solar on our roofs. Can you recommend some trees that are shady but don't grow higher than 25 to 30 feet?
Oh, nothing like a hard question to start with. Yes, I understand. With the solar, yes, solar and trees do not go well together. So some of the species would be good is looking at any of those earlier flowering trees. Those are all small. If you go onto the tree selection page on our Trees Forever website, it has the list of some small trees. Generally, they're less than 30 feet that you could look at to see if those would work for you. So what you're generally looking for are trees that are going to be small. Also on the this are trees and shrubs for pollinators. You can see that. Also on that website, it gives you the heights of the mature trees. It also tells you what they need as far as sunlight. So if they need shade or full sun, it gives you that information. So you can refer to this document as well.
Very nice. And I went ahead and sent out that link again. So it's treesforever.org /tree_selection.
Correct.
And there's lots of different resources on there. So if you guys get a chance to check that out, there's a ton of information on there. The next question is coming from Laura. She says, let folks know if their community belongs to a Tree City USA. They will definitely have a tree board. Otherwise, they may not. Do you want to talk a little bit about Tree City USA for a second?
So Tree City USA is a national recognition for communities, and Illinois is ranked 2nd or 3rd, I think, in the country for the number of Tree City USA communities. So oftentimes there are requirements for Tree City USA. One is to have a tree board or a tree committee. The second one is to have an ordinance, tree ordinance on the books. The third is to have an annual Arbor Day proclamation that does not actually have to happen on Arbor Day. It can happen anytime throughout the year. And the fourth one is to have a forestry budget of $2 per capita of your population of your community. If your community is a Tree City USA, oftentimes they will have the signage at entrance into the community that says, "We are Tree City USA." You could check at your village hall to find out if they are or are not, if you're not sure. And if you would like to start one, you know, get some like-minded community members together who love trees and want to do good things for your community. You can start one. That's part of what we're doing with Trees Forever with our Illinois communities, is we're helping some of them get that Tree City USA status. So yes, there are many different options to how to find out if you are a Tree City or not.
Absolutely. Okay, so our next question comes from Virginia. She would like to hear some suggestions for stream buffer, a meandering creek. So I'm assuming that's referring to erosion and in general buffer plantings.
Okay, so if you have a stream or a river and you want to plant plantings along that, you want to plant trees and shrubs that are suitable for to be able to withstand flooding for periods of up to 6 weeks at a time. So you want to plant trees that are more floodplain based. Again, some of the trees on this list, trees and shrubs for pollinators, are trees that we commonly plant in riparian buffers. Things like sycamore, bald cypress is a good one, hornbeam, shellbark hickory, sometimes basswood, swamp white oak. There are a variety of trees. Again, it's based on what your goals are for your property. If you're wanting to, generally you plant the fastest growing trees right along the water's edge. And then as you move upwards away from the stream, you start to plant the slower growing trees and shrubs. So we'd be happy to talk with you, either myself in Illinois or my colleague Jeff Jensen in Iowa. Either one of us would be happy to talk to you about how to plan a riparian buffer along a stream.
Great. Our next question also comes from Virginia. She is wondering about concerns for underground utilities, specifically what you should think about as far as spacing with utilities.
Now that's going to depend on your utility company, but in general, if you have underground utilities, you have to hand dig with a shovel. You can't use an auger to dig your holes, but generally it's a minimum of 18 to 24 inches away from your utility.
Okay. And the next question is from Wayne. He is wondering, how tall does the black cherry get? And I know you referred to that, but I guess we had a little bit of an audio glitch there. So sorry, guys, that we didn't catch that sooner.
Yeah, the black cherry, it will get up to 100 feet tall. So it gets fairly large. Then another thing with the black cherry is that it doesn't do well in strong winds. So it needs to be in somewhat of a protected area. But it gets fairly large.
Okay. We have a question from Julie asking if you would recommend the linden tree as a good tree to plant in your yard.
I would. I love lindens. Lindens and basswoods, they're a fabulous tree, a beautiful shade tree. The one downside is that they are also a favorite of Japanese beetles. So if you understand that and realize that every year during the 6-week period that Japanese beetles are going to basically defoliate your tree, it's a great tree. It has a beautiful white flower that blooms in the summer, June and July, and it smells magnificent. If you walk under it, you can just hear all the bees and insects in the tree. I love lindens and basswood. I think they're great trees, but you have to just recognize that they are a favorite of Japanese beetles, and so every year they will get defoliated.
Do you want to, in a few sentences, mention for Japanese beetles what you would recommend to try and keep that linden tree alive?
The Japanese beetles defoliating it are not going to kill it. It's going to stress the tree, but it's not going to kill it. There are some chemicals that you could spread on your yard to kill the grubs of Japanese beetles. However, they are not specific to Japanese beetles, and they will kill everything else. So they will kill all the good insects as well. What I do is generally when the Japanese beetles are on my tree is I generally go out with a bucket that I can carry. It's filled with warm soapy water, and I knock off as much as I can, or I spray the tree with warm soapy water.
Good tips. Our next question also comes from Julie. Julie is wondering, do certain trees grow better in sandy soil?
Yes. Yes, they do. Again, I'm going to refer you to this document, trees and shrubs, if you could see it. And you are looking for trees that have D. They need dry soil. So there are some. The black oak is a good example of one that does very well in sandy soil. You're not going to plant water-loving trees in sandy soil. So any tree that requires dry, that's what you're looking for.
Okay. Our next question comes from Don. He says, I planted a non-deciduous magnolia tree last week. I want to establish a trunk and not have any limbs on the lower 4 to 5 foot. When should I prune the lower limbs off to lessen the negative impact of the tree?
So if you just planted it last week, Dawn, I would wait a full year before you start pruning your tree. You want to give it time to get established into the space where you planted it. Next year, ideally in the winter time, January, February, and when you do prune, depending on what size tree you've planted, you only want to prune, you don't want to prune off more than 1/3 of the tree's branches at any one time. So it may be over the course of the next several years that you do your pruning. So you planted this year, I would give it a whole year and probably not even touch it until winter 2021, like December 2021, January 2022. And then at that time, you could start pruning off small bits at a time. But it's going to take over a period of years. You don't want to do it all at once.
Great. And we do have a lot of information about pruning. I think enough that we do plan on doing a webinar pretty soon, sometime in the next month. So keep an eye out for that. There's a whole lot of things to look for. So that's a good summary, Debbie.
And also you can, we will have Trees Forever, we'll have upcoming webinars. You can follow us, look on our website, treesforever.org/webinars. As the new ones come available, we're gonna have a new one about every week and a half or so, week and a half to 2 weeks. So be looking for the next one coming up here.
Yeah, there's going to be some extras during Earth Week, so keep an eye out for it, which is next week. Our next question comes from Vicky. She says, suggestions for where to find a Shawnee Brave bald cypress. It's a variety that is only 20 feet wide.
Wow, I don't know. I would just check with your local nurseries, and oftentimes if you have a specific tree that you're looking for, when you go in and talk to them, oftentimes they can get it for you. I'm not familiar with that cultivar, so I don't know where specifically you can get that one, but check with your local nurseries. When you go in there, you know you want that variety, ask them if they can get it for you.
Okay. Let's see. Sandy has a question going back to the conversation about Japanese beetles. She says they certainly are a problem now. Are any trees, especially pollinators trees, not susceptible?
Yes. Actually, a majority of the trees are not susceptible, but lindens and basswoods are, and any fruit trees are susceptible, as well as any member of the rose family. So the serviceberry and the crabapple both would be, because they're in the rose family. But yeah, I have a bald cypress that I planted at my parents', and you wouldn't think that Japanese beetles would like bald cypress, but they do. So when we had a very heavy infestation of them, yeah, I was going out, I was knocking off a 5-gallon bucket every day of Japanese beetles off the bald cypress. So it's a 6-week period that Japanese beetles emerge. And so you can just manage for 6 weeks. You'll be okay. But fruit trees, trees in the rose family, and lindens and basswoods are highly susceptible to Japanese beetles. They're some of the favorites.
Okay. The next question comes from Arnold. He says, is it good to plant hostas around pin oak trees?
No, it is not. You should not plant any flowers, any plants like that around the base of your trees, because those plants are actually competing with the tree for the moisture and nutrients. So if you want to plant your hostas, plant them elsewhere and not at the base of your tree.
That is a really good question, because you see that so often. And so I'm really glad that you guys answered that. That's very good. Our next question comes from Deanna. What types of willow are better? I like weeping willow, but is there another willow that's better?
Weeping willow is a great choice. Willows are all fairly fast growing. There are some native species of willow. The black willow is one. It just depends on where you're planting them. As far as a yard tree, a weeping willow is a great choice. But just do your research, looking at the other willows. I don't know that you can find many other willows to be as a yard tree. It's not one that's very common for a yard tree. Mostly we see it out in the rural areas, along our waterways, along the streams, where it can be planted just by taking a cutting of the tree and sticking it in the ground, and it will grow. You could try that, even if you know of a place that has some native willows and you want to just take a cutting of it and stick it in flower pots, it'll grow. Stick it in the ground.
And that's a great way to stabilize a riverbank, correct? To use some willows.
Yes. Willows are fairly fast growing, so it is one of the great ways to stabilize stream banks.
Our next question comes from Barb. She says, is there any way to stop tree suckers attached to the base of the tree? And I have one tree where the suckers travel 3 feet.
It depends on, generally no. What you can do is basically prune them off every single year. That's what we do. Generally, if a tree is shooting up suckers, it has some sort of a root issue underground, whether it be if the tree is stressed, or it could be a multitude of issues. But if it's sending up suckers, it generally means that there's some issue somewhere. And basically all you can do is take your pruners or your loppers and cut those off every year when you see them.
Great. The next one comes from Reverend Jim. He says, of the trees you reviewed, which ones are the most wind resistant?
Most wind resistant. Oaks, hickories, hackberries, bald cypress, Sassafras, it's fairly wind resistant. Ginkgo is hardy. The tulip tree, Kentucky coffee tree. I would stay away from the ones that are not wind resistant. Would be the black cherry and the red bud, serviceberry. River birch is kind of it may or may not be wind resistant, depends if it's single, multi-stem, or multi-stem, but oaks and hickories for sure, the tulip tree, many of them are wind resistant.
Great. And I want to add too that we do have some resources online that specifically talk about pruning to help prevent wind damage. So if you go to treesforever.org/recover, there's a bunch of different resources there as well.
Yes, I was going to mention that as well. If you're looking for trees that are more resistant to wind or more resistant to ice or flooding, going to another page on our website, treesforever.org/recover. There's a whole list of documents about trees that are resistant to ice, ice damage, flooding, drought, wind, and tornado. And on the back of those, it has a list of trees that are more resistant to those natural events.
Our next question comes from Mary. She says, we are thinking of planting 2 Norway spruce trees in our very front yard as we live in the country. I think we have the space and want the privacy and reduce mowing needs. What are your thoughts about Norway spruce?
I think it's a good tree if you have the space for them, because they can get fairly large. You make sure you want to plant them far enough apart so they're not touching, and as long as they're not something that you have already an abundance of in your yard, as long as these are going to be something a different species from what you already have, as long as you water them, they'll be fine.
Great. Our next one comes from Chuck. He says, we have a wooded lot and want to remove a lot of invasive Japanese honeysuckle. What understory trees or shrubs would you recommend to replace what we remove? Our main interest is that they are native and shade tolerant.
I was just doing that over the weekend myself, Chuck, at my sister and brother-in-law's house, and all afternoon on Friday and all day on Saturday, we removed honeysuckle and burned it. And let me tell you, yesterday I couldn't move. But there are many different types of shrubs. Again, I would refer to this Trees and Shrubs for Pollinators document. If you're looking specifically for understory trees, it depends on what you have growing in your area, what's already growing there. But there are many different types of shrubs you could get. You could get some flowering shrubs that do well in shade. You could get some that have fruit on them for wildlife. So it just depends on what you're looking for. But this is a good resource for you to refer to. You can see that. That will give you some ideas of some understory trees. Things that I'm thinking of replanting, because we're going to have to do the same thing, is some spice bush, some button bush in the wet areas, maybe some sassafras. It's a more understory tree. So there's just a wide variety of choices. That it just depends on what you like.
Okay, our next question is coming from Laura, and she says, I've seen a lot of farmers removing all trees and shrubs from creek lines. What's up with that? That's a good question.
It's a good question. So there's many different and there's many different answers to that. One thing is that farmers don't want water to be standing on their property. So by removing the vegetation, you're increasing getting the water off your property faster. Also, you want to generally not shade out the crops. So it could be the farthest row. I I grew up on a farm. My dad's a farmer. I work with a lot of farmers, and a lot of them are not doing that, but there are some that still are removing. So it's a matter of education and talking about the importance of leaving those plants there for vegetation, to help reduce soil erosion, wind erosion, also help with water quality. But the biggest reasons is they don't want standing water, trying to get the water off the property, and then also they don't want their crops to be shaded. And so those are legitimate concerns. And so working together, we could resolve those issues.
Sure. And we were talking about this the other day where, you know, then there's a question of erosion. Like, sure, the water's leaving, but what's being washed away with it? So that is, that's a really big conversation.
So there are other options if they don't want trees and shrubs, is that they could put a grass waterway there, planting a buffer strip of grass to help hold that soil in place. So there are alternatives to having the trees and shrubs there if that's not desirable by them.
Sure. And so again, contacting Debbie about that, or Jeff Jensen, if you're in Iowa, and all of that contact information is on our webpage. If you go to treesforever.org /staff, you can find someone nearby you who might be able to help you with your specific situation. So, okay, moving on to the next question. Our next question comes from Katie. She says, what about inside trees or trees in pots? My lemon tree inside is losing all its leaves.
That's a good question. I'm not all that familiar with exotic trees to know why they might be losing their leaves. It could be too much or not enough water. It could be the time of year. I'm not familiar with a lemon tree to know when they should be
Sure. We're experts in native trees, so that's kind of the big.
So I'm not 100. I don't know. I would suggest that you maybe contact your extension. Maybe they have an idea, or maybe go to your local nursery or garden center or wherever you got the tree from and ask them. Do some Google research to see, you know, what are some issues with lemon trees. But I can't give you a definite answer because I'm not very familiar with lemon trees at all.
Okay. Let's see. We had someone else ask about willow trees, which I think we pretty much answered. They were asking whether we recommend willows, and the short answer is yes. After that, we have a question from Mary. Mary said, what do you think of the American yellowwood trees, and do you advise a female or male yellowwood?
So I'm not all that familiar with yellowwood. We have planted quite a few in various communities, just trying to get some diversity, but they are a great tree. Now I don't know about the male versus female. If there's fruits on one, I would have to do some research on that and get back to you, because I honestly, I don't know.
Okay. Our next comment comes from Illinois Field Coordinator Kevin Bennett, who wants to put in a plug for Under the Canopy, which is another great resource.
If you hang on 1 second, I got it.
So, and we can try and get that up. I can try and send out a link for where that is on our website afterwards as well.
I don't have one right handy, but there is a resource we have here in Illinois. It's called Under the Canopy. It was developed by the Illinois Forestry Development Council. It's a nice poster size, and if you are interested in getting one, you can contact myself or my colleague Kevin Bennett. As well as the University of Illinois Extension offices. If your community is a Tree City USA community, they would have received some as well. But this is a great resource. It has a, you unfold it and it has a list, talks about proper planting, proper pruning of species, talks about how far away from your home you plant your tree, how far away from your utilities, as well as if you have a, if you're on a corner, how far away from the corner so you don't impair safety and vision. You unfold it again and it has all kinds of information about trees, and then you unfold it one more time and it's a poster of all variety of trees that are great, a mix of native and non-native species that are great for planting in communities. And the nice thing about it is that it has at the bottom of the poster size, it has the size of the tree, the height. So it goes from small all the way to large, depending on how much space you have. So we will get that link up. And if you are interested in getting one, let us know and we can send it to you.
And I just want to do a quick mention. I don't know at 12:30 if we're going to get kicked off here, but we will try and keep answering your questions. So I guess we'll see. Our next question is coming from Beverly. She says, I have the beautiful paperback birch tree, multi-limbs. One limb has been struck by lightning. Dead pieces of the stems are falling off during windstorms. Do I have the whole tree cut down or just one limb, or should I just leave the tree alone?
If you're having limbs fall off, if one of the stems has been hit by lightning, I would try to just prune that limb off. Unless there's issues with your entire tree, you shouldn't need to remove the whole tree. You should be able to just have that one stem pruned off so that you're not having dead branches fall all year long every time there's a windstorm.
And again, if you go to that treesforever.org/recover link, that will help you with some pruning tips. That's perfect for something like being struck by lightning. Our next question comes from Beth Roof. She says, I want to plant a group of evergreens in my yard where deer roam. I have mixed reviews about hemlock and blue spruce for deer resistance. What is your opinion on these trees, and what are others that are deer resistant?
Deer love everything. I would not recommend planting blue spruce at all because of the disease that is affecting all of them right now, the rhizosphere and needlecast. We're seeing blue spruce die, and in combination with heavy drought years, hard drought years. So blue spruce are not recommended to be planted right now. I would recommend arborvitae is a favorite of deer as well. The one thing, depending on how many you're planting, if it's possible, I would say to fence them to protect them from deer until they get large enough, which would be maybe for a couple years. If you're planting a lot of them, fencing is not an option. You can refer to the this form for windbreaks for evergreens species. It does not say which ones are deer tolerant and which ones are not. Deer are pretty much going to eat whatever they can get, whatever's, so there are no trees that are 100% resistant to deer. They're not going to eat them. So my suggestion would be to plant a diverse mix. Don't plant all the same kind, or if you're planting a windbreak, plant 3 or 4 different species, not just the same one or 2. It's going to give you a better chance of survivability.
Okay. We also have a question from Deanna. She says, what is the wildlife value of black tupelo? I don't know if I said that correctly.
Yep.
Oaks are very high. How does the tupelo compare?
Black tupelo or black gum, depending on where you are. They are very high for wildlife. That would be another tree that I would add to my beautiful fall color, because they have the gorgeous deep red, almost purple color in the fall. They're beautiful. It's more of an understory tree. They do well in wet areas, but they also have a very high wildlife. They're very high in for wildlife as far as food content. So it's a great tree. It's actually, it's also on this list for pollinators.
Our next question is for a recommendation for windbreaks in Iowa, specifically on a southwest Iowa acreage.
I would refer you to this, that we have the species for windbreaks. And also I would encourage you to contact our Iowa field coordinator, Jeff Jensen. He would be the one that would be very knowledgeable for a south-facing slope.
And he is Jay Jensen at treesforever.org. He would love to hear from you. Our next question is coming from Rick. Is the Dawn redwood tree good for urban areas?
Mixed reviews. I'll be honest, it gets fairly large. I have seen them planted, but you need a large space because they get very large. I've seen them planted in cemeteries and they do very well there. So I don't know that it would, unless there's a smaller cultivar, I don't know that it would make a great street tree, but I don't see why, if you have the space, you couldn't plant one in your yard. But you need a lot of space because they're a big tree.
Our next question comes from Patricia. Of the trees you mentioned, which are best able to compete with ground that may have lots of honeysuckle roots and black clay soil?
So you have clay soil and you have lots of, so I'm taking it to be that you've cut a lot of honeysuckle out of an area and it treated it and left the roots in. Any of these with the clay soil though, you're going to want more floodplain species. So the swamp white oak would be good. You could do the shagbark hickory would be good. A bur oak would do well as black walnut. Any of those would do well for clay soil. And the weeping willow, if you wanted to plant weeping willow. So all of those would do well in clay soil.
Okay. The next question comes from, we have someone asking about whether this will be recorded. Yes, we'll be emailing out the recording afterwards. The next person asks, what native or ornamental tree or shrub will do well and compete in shade on the north side of a house?
So, again, I'm going to refer you to this document. And if you flip to the third page is where it starts. I don't know if you can see that. Where it starts the shrub. So there are some native species listed on the third and fourth pages of shrubs that you could choose from. What do you like? There are many varieties that will do well. Looking for shade, part shade. There's some dogwoods, some hazelnut would do well in part shade, sumac. Looking at my list here. Just about all of them would do well in part shade. So refer to that document.
Okay, the next question is coming from Katie. She is wondering, how effective is the treatment for ash borer disease, for emerald ash borer disease?
Emerald ash borer, so depends on which treatment you're doing. The treatments have gotten better over the years, but they're not specific to just the emerald ash borer. So if you do the trunk injections on your tree, or even the ground drenching on your tree, those chemicals are systematic, which means not systematic, systemic, which means they flow up through the tree. So they would be found in the flowers of the tree. So if you are going to treat your ash tree, you want to make sure you do it after they bloom, because bees love ash flowers. So you want to do it after they bloom, and that way you get almost a whole year, and the chemical can disseminate, so it won't be as strong. It's something that if you have an ash tree that is a favorite, you know, it's sentimental attachment, it's a huge shade tree, providing shade for your house, you treat it. But if you have smaller ones, just know that most likely you should probably just replant. And the best thing, if you want to try to save those large trees, is you do have to treat them annually, but it's still a good idea to plant something else nearby that will eventually take over.
Okay, our next question comes from Rhonda. She says, will service berries do okay in clay-like soil?
Not generally. They like good soil. They don't like wet. So, well, some of I'm going to take that back and say I'm wrong. Yes, some of them will do well in wet. Depends on which ones they are. So as I mentioned, there are 20 different varieties of serviceberry. Some of them do well in wet soil. Some of them do well in our mesic soil, which is what most of us have, and then some of them will do well in dry soil as well. So just depends on which serviceberry you're getting.
Okay. And will that information be on the tag when you buy the tree from a nursery?
It should be, yes. It should be.
Okay. We have a question about Norway spruce. Are Norway spruce helpful to pollinators?
Not really, but they make great nesting sites for birds. They don't provide much benefit to pollinators because there's no fruit or flowers or anything, but they do provide great nesting areas and overwintering habitat for birds.
Our next question comes from Mary. She's wondering, won't some natives emerge on their own like dogwood when you remove invasives?
Yes, they will. They will. And so once you remove, for instance, bush honeysuckle, which I spent the weekend removing, yeah, we're going to see what comes up next year. We might get some native shrubs come up, as well as many of the native wildflowers are definitely will come up. But once you remove the invasives, you may not have to replant. You just have to give it a little bit of time for those native plants that are in the seed bank to emerge.
Okay. We have a question about resources or websites with examples of designs and species selections for visual screen for NAR by wind turbines. I'm not sure what that's referring to. Do you want to take a gander at that, Debbie, or should we move on to the next one?
I don't know of any. I'm going to make an assumption here and say that you're looking for just a visual barrier, for like putting just a visual barrier between your house and the wind turbine so that perhaps you can't see it all of the time. It would be the same as putting like a windbreak up. It would be multiple rows, generally 2 to 3. And you could do any combination of trees and shrubs that you wanted. You could do a row of shrubs, flowering shrubs, a row of flowering trees, a row of evergreens. You could do 3 rows of evergreens and conifers. For a visual break like that, it's whatever you are looking for. But it would be the same design as setting up a windbreak. So generally the trees are planted in rows of, they're about 15 to 20 feet apart, and the trees spaced about 15 to 20 feet apart, depending on what they are. Shrubs you could plant closer, up to 6 feet apart.
Okay, our last question comes from Katie. She is wondering, is there a good app that identifies plants using your smartphone? Your smart.
There are actually a couple. There's the iNaturalist app that you can use, and there's also an app called Plant Finder. So if you have a flowering plant, you can just take a picture of the flower and it will show up. So those are two that I have personally used. There may be others, but those two are the ones that I know of: iNaturalist and Plant Finder.
Okay, wonderful. We have a few other follow-ups that we can do individually because you're asking for different publications. So we will do our best to follow up. And if you do not hear from us soon, go ahead and feel free to contact us with questions. Once again, I'm Jackie Wedeking. I'm the Communications and Marketing Manager. You can reach me with the link that you already have in your email. And Debbie has her contact information up there. We love questions. Please send them our way. We're so glad that you were able to join us today. So thank you.
Thank you. Everybody stay safe and have a great day. Thanks.